Madam Vice Mayor, we are now live.
Okay, thank you. Good morning. I'm Vice Mayor Kilgore, and I'm Chair of the Board of Commissions Committee. And I'd like to welcome you all to the August 22nd remote meeting. All our council members and staff are participating virtually. To help our audience follow along, I'll state each section of the agenda aloud. We are streaming live on the Virtual Engagement Hub, which is accessible through the Virtual Engagement Hub link on the front page of the city website. We also have an option for the public to listen by phone. And for those out there with us today, we'd like to welcome you. And for today's meeting, we have the option for people to call in and comment live during the meeting. To call in and comment live, use the same number, 855-925-2801. Meeting code 9478. Your phone will be muted and you will hear the meeting live. At this point, speakers will need to push *3 to enter into the speaker queue. And now I'll go through and introduce all the committee members and staff who are participating virtually today. Council and staff, as I call your name, please say a quick hello. Councilwoman Antoinette Mosley.
Good morning.
Councilwoman Kim Rooney.
Good morning.
Assistant City Manager Ben Woody.
Good morning.
A Deputy City Clerk Sarah Gross.
Good morning.
We also have Planning and Zoning Commission candidates who will be introduced themselves in their interview. And we have a Riverfront Development Chair and staff who are here also will introduce themselves when we get to their agenda, their item on the agenda. Okay, our first item of business is to conduct the planning and zoning interviews. A planning and zoning review text for proposed amendments to the Unified Development Ordinance and to hear proposals to the zone or a change of the zoning properties regulated under the UDO. Then make the recommendations to City Council for final review. Today, the committee will be virtually interviewing 7 candidates for, actually 6 candidates. Ms. Rooney, Councilwoman Rooney.
I just have a question about order. Are we also going to approve the minutes from the last meeting? Is that
Yes.
it? Okay, I just want to make sure.
Yes, okay, yes, okay. And today's virtually 6 candidates for 4 seats on the Plan and Zoning. And one of those seats, Kimberly Levi, is eligible and interested in reappointment, and the remaining 3 are not eligible for reappointment. Those will be vacant. And each interview will be 8 minutes each. Candidates, please refer to the countdown timer displayed in the virtual meeting room. Appointments will be made during the evening City Council meeting starting at 5 p.m. today, and you're welcome to attend or watch online. And before we get ready to start our interview with our candidates, I'd like to get approval for the minutes of the July minutes.
Madam Chair, I move that the minutes for the July meeting be approved as presented.
Thank you. Can I get a second?
This is Kim, second.
Okay, at this time, I'd like to take a roll call. Councilwoman Antoinette Mosley.
Aye.
Councilwoman Kim Rooney.
Aye.
And myself, Councilwoman Kilgore. Aye. And there, okay.
And before we begin, I'll just note that we do not have any callers in the public comment queue right now.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you. And if there are no more objections, we will begin our interview. Okay, Councilwoman Antoinette Mosley.
This is a moment of hand raises.
No worries.
I just wanted to take a moment before we do the interview process to kind of put something out there with my colleagues. I was excited to review all of the applications. I am, however, a bit concerned when I look at who we're losing from this committee and the potential for a lack of diversity. So with that in mind, and having spoken to someone who currently sits on P and Z. I'm wondering if we could be open to, even after doing the interviews, perhaps not making all of the selections to recommend to council today, and perhaps hold applications open for a little longer, just throwing that out there before we begin the process. And then I suppose we can talk about it after we do the interviews. I'll talk it over to Kim.
Councilwoman Kim Rooney, yes.
I support that request, Antoinette. And I also, when I last spoke with the chair, Joe Archibald, he said he would be willing to stay on if needed, not because he would be reappointed, but if we left his seat open while we re-advertised if needed. That's my most recent understanding. And I know it's a lot to ask of folks who've just completed 2 full terms, but that's my understanding.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, well, basically, I am in an agreement with this also because I am concerned about not having more diversity on the board. Trent Hall is a friend of mine, and I was really looking forward to hearing what he had to say. So that being said, I guess what we will do is the process would be, I would like to sort of see from Kim and Antoinette, like you were saying that we need to sort of delay it or carry on with the interviews we have now, but delay it for to be open for more candidates. Is that what you're saying?
Because ideally what I was thinking was we could definitely consider appointing him, and then maybe make a recommendation for 1 or 2, but it would be up to you ladies. But I definitely don't want to close it out. And one reason I'm thinking that is literally yesterday I was talking to someone about something totally different, and he brought up zoning issues, and I was kind of surprised. I was like, "Oh, is that your thing?" And he was like, "Yeah." And I think this person would have applied. I think people just didn't know about it, so I want to give more time.
So do you think it's possible that we could basically hold 1 seat open and appoint the other 3?
Well, I don't want to say a number this early because I might be wowed by the interviews.
Okay.
I just keep the notion of holding a seat, 2 seats, 3 seats open
Yes.
before we make recommendations at the end. So I don't have a number in mind.
So in other words, what we could do is go ahead and listen to the interviews to be presented to council, and then also give them the request that we would like to, possibly, if we are not able to seat everyone, that we could, hold some seats open for future.
That was my process.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so at this time, what we'd like to do is our first candidate interview today will be Mr. Paul Tay. So we'll turn it over to Paul. Thank you.
Good morning, counselors. I'm really inspired by the conversation about diversity on the Planning and Zoning Board. Just to put it out there, I am Chinese American. I grew up in Tulsa, Oklahoma, in the Midwest. I've been in America since 1971. So I'm very aware of what planning and zoning has done to persons of color, in that it actually separated those folks from the rest of America. So I'm interested in being on the Planning and Zoning Commission because it's one of those issues that is a far-reaching issue that the general public really doesn't think about in terms of how it separates Americans from other Americans. And the historical history of planning and zoning was really to separate Black people from white Americans, really. And that's something that hasn't really been addressed in the mainstream area. And I would like to be on the Planning and Zoning Commission as a Chinese American, because the Asian American voice has not been heard as much in these policy situations. Just a little bit about myself. I've been in Asheville since March of this year. I'm headed to law school. I have successfully docketed petitions for certiorari in the U.S. Supreme Court. In Oklahoma, I did some Indian law, and I'm headed to the U.S.-Mexico border to do immigration law in relation to all the asylum cases that's coming up. And in the meantime, I would like to be in the Planning and Zoning Commission of the city of Asheville, specifically because this very cognizant, very intense recognition of diversity on Planning and Zoning Commission. Historically, the Planning and Zoning Commission has not been diverse. It's been held by a small group of folks that has been in power since 1776, and the Constitution was written by property owners for property owners. And as a practitioner in the constitutional law, I see that Constitution is a bit flawed in that the Constitution does not address human rights as much as property rights. So we need to look at Planning and Zoning Commission as it relates to property rights, to incorporating some of the human rights aspect of the issue. That's the the software part of it, the soft core. We have the hardware part of it. We have platting, we have permits and so forth. But we need to look at some of the soft issues, the human issues, really. My vision in the Planning and Zoning Commission is that we need to do planning and zoning to really promote what's around us, to promote industry that's happening all around us. And that industry is tourism. We need to do planning and zoning so that it brings people together, first of all. The American program is like this. It's real simple. Look at no one in the eye, don't talk to anybody, and trust no one. And I believe that Asheville needs to do the counter-American program. Look at everybody in the eye, trust everybody until they act differently, and speak to everybody. And let's bring Americans together here in Asheville. Planning and Zoning Commission can be an integral part, an important part of actually doing Asheville like no other American city has ever done before. We need to give tourists a place to come to where it's nothing like where they are. I see a lot of tourists coming in from Chicago, and they come here for the nature. They come here for the people, for the connections that they make here in Asheville. And we need to really leverage that feeling already on the ground right now to promote what's happening right now is tourism, and what's going to be happening in the near future, which is autonomous driverless vehicles. I believe that Planning and Zoning Commission can be used to do the tourism business like it's never been done before in anywhere in America. We need to really promote what we have right here, a great diverse tourist industry. We need to look at what's going to happen in the future in terms of transportation. I have a background in transportation as I was the first City of LA's bicycle transportation manager, managing a $50 million budget in a $2 billion transportation budget in LA as doing bicycle pedestrian projects. So I see that the Planning and Zoning Commission can set public policy to really do Asheville like it's never been done before, tourism like it's never been done before. Let's give the tourists something they've never seen in their own town or anywhere in America. So we need to look at some rethinking about how we do comprehensive planning, how we do land use planning, and certainly my favorite subject is the minimum parking requirements. We need to look at these large mall parkings as possible housing, as mixed use. I'm really inspired by what happened down at the Biltmore Estates near I-26 and 146, where there are people living in a shopping mall. that is something like, right out of LA. I was telling the lady out there, that's so LA-ish. So let's build on that. Let's build on what we have. Is the tourism industry that's really pumping the economy here. I like to say, some of the comments that I've seen lately where the tourism is down and we have a lot of folks blaming the homeless and poverty issues. The homeless people and the poverty issue are not the problem. It's just simply the symptom of a larger issue. Panhandlers are not the problem for the downturn in tourism. What really is happening, I believe, is tourist expectations, the market expectations of what they expect of where they want to go to. So we need to look at that downturn as a possible opportunity, as a great opportunity for reset on how we do planning and zoning to support that industry to meet market expectations. That's changing every day.
Thank you, Paul. Does anyone have any questions they'd like to ask? Paul? Ms. Rooney? Councilwoman Rooney, I'm sorry.
I know we're almost out of time, but I have one question that I'm asking each of the candidates, and that's our strategic priorities adopted in this year's budget included some directions around revision of our Unified Development Ordinance. What are some creative solutions you suggest for planning and zoning we face, and how can they help us meet our strategic priorities like housing, core services, reparation, climate and neighborhood resiliency? And what would be the barriers of implementing your suggestion, or can we do it today?
We could do it today, right here. We need a policy change to, number one, get rid of the minimum parking requirements. That's happening. That's not a new thing at all. That is so easy. Once we get rid of the minimum parking requirements for all these, for the future development, it's going to open up a lot of opportunities for housing, for affordable housing. If you look at, Asheville Outlet Mall, there's like acres of asphalt out there. And what do I see when I see that? I see housing. I see mixed-use development. I see, walking and bicycling opportunities. So the very first thing that we could do without a whole lot of effort, it's been done. It's happening across the country right now, is get rid of the minimum parking requirements. Let the market decide how much parking we need.
Thank you, Paul.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but that is time.
Thanks. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Kay. All right, and our next candidate, I believe, is in the room. We have Mr. Scott Ladowski. Sorry if I said that incorrectly. And I will go ahead and start the timer now.
Excuse me, 1 minute, Sarah. Before you start the timer, maybe I was just wondering, I saw where the 2-minute warning would come up for the interviews. Maybe we could ask the candidates to stop around that time, so we'll have 2 minutes maybe to ask questions. So with that, is that okay, Scott? Scott, I think you're muted. Scott?
You think? Yep, I'm here. Sorry about that. Good morning, everyone.
Yeah, would that work for you, Scott?
Yes, it would.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
All right, the timer has started.
Well, I'll go ahead and ask you a first question because Kim's question was actually my question. Scott, can you go ahead and just give us a brief idea of why you want to be on the planning and zoning?
Well, I just moved here recently in the last 6 months, and I'm a recovering local government administrator, and I thought it would be a good idea to jump right in and get involved as quickly as possible and lend a fresh perspective to what's going on in Asheville. And my background in local government is mostly related to projects management analysis and budget and finance. So I do bring a pretty good blended skill set that could help out the Planning Commission make some decisions. And my background or degree is in political science, so I always tend to nerd out on stuff like this. So I welcome the opportunity to contribute to my new community and look forward to helping out however I can.
Okay, I can ask you another one. What tools does Asheville need to explore to balance growth with the desires of folks living in neighborhoods?
I think looking at more mixed use development would be helpful, and maybe moving away from the single family home model and allowing to have more units on one piece of property than just a single family home. I know in other cities they've explored that, and it also provides more community. And I think, improving upon trail networks and, just improving overall quality of life avenues for community, I think will be greatly helpful.
I think I saw Councilwoman Rooney's hand.
Scott, thank you for applying to be considered for our Planning and Zoning Commission. In our strategic priorities adopted by Council in this year's budget process, we included direction to revise some parts of our Unified Development Ordinance. This question has 3 parts, 3 layers, if you will. What are some creative solutions you suggest for zoning challenges we face, like housing, climate change mitigation? 2 is how zoning can help us meet our strategic priorities, things like housing, core services, reparations, community and neighborhood resiliency. And then what are the barriers to the implementation of your suggestion, or could we do it today?
Well, I'll tell you right now, I'm pretty new to the community, so I don't know all the facts and figures, what's going on. I'm learning every day, and I think it would be valuable to have a fresh perspective on this commission to look at things differently. And in my experience in local government within Colorado, I know in a lot of the resort communities, especially where I worked in Pagosa Springs, that was always a challenge in terms of trying to figure out workforce housing. And I know a lot of resort towns in Colorado have kind of looked at like almost a dorm scenario for most of their key workers like teachers, firefighter, police officers. I think we could expand upon that and look at how we can maybe house key segments like the service industry. I think if we stabilize all 3 or 4 of those areas, I think we have a better chance of developing, more affordable options for people, and then maybe look at the middle housing segments as well. That takes time, and a lot of the federal programs that I'm aware of, they have, too many stipulations for people that can utilize them. And so Asheville is going to have to get more creative about thinking outside the box to fulfill those middle housing and those stabilization opportunities. It might not be based off income. It might just be based off, other factors that you guys need to create or the Planning Commission creates, because the number of housing units that those federal and state programs provide are not enough. It's a small dent in terms of the overall need, especially here in Asheville. So we're going to have to look at best practices across the country, not just in North Carolina. And that's something I'm used to doing in regards to looking at new solutions and programming and trying to find best practices. So.
And that sort of gives a segue into my question, basically, would have been what ideas or suggestions would you have to actually increase our affordable housing options here in Asheville? So you sort of actually talked about that to some degree, which I greatly appreciate. And I realize in Colorado, where you have more of the land base, whereas with here, we're more constricted because of our geography here. So, and I'm just wondering, when you talked about the options for affordable housing, could you give us any other ideas or suggestions that you may have that you think would actually help? I listened to some of the ones that you're saying, the best practices of different things they're doing as far as the dormitories and things of that nature. Do you have any suggestions of your own after being here for a while that you think would actually help with that?
I think it'd be cool to see, like artist campuses where it'd be a mixed use development where the shops and studios are on the first floor, and then allow residents and offices to be on second and third floor. You don't want to take away from the overall views that people have in and around Asheville, but at the same time, building up is probably going to be one of your, fewer options available. If you want to spend a bunch of money on doing site work, go for it. But I think you're going to get better bang for your buck if you build up and create a mixed environment in terms of the solution that you're providing, and whether the studios or shops subsidize the housing on top. That'd be a unique way to go about it as well.
That is
I don't know.
time.
It's time.
Thank you very much, Scott. Appreciate it.
All right, and our next candidate is Andrew Fletcher, who is actually filling the space for Trent Hall. So that will be our third candidate, Mr. Andrew Fletcher. And I will go ahead. I see you there. Start the timer now.
Good morning, Chair Kilgore, Council Members Mosley and Roney. You guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you for the opportunity to interview for this position. I'm rolling off of Downtown Commission and Public Art and Cultural Commission, so I've got some room on my dance card right now to continue my service. In my time at the Downtown Commission, serving as both an interim chair and a vice chair currently, I have reviewed dozens and dozens of projects and seen again and again where our outdated UDO has led to, let's be charitable, suboptimal results in many, many cases in downtown. And so it was with some great excitement that I saw that UDO revision is on the on the strategic plan now at the council level, because it's something that I think we've needed for a very long time. All the our built environment has been created legally, and the problems that we have, the legacy problems that we have from our built environment, whether they be issues from redlining, issues of segregation, all these things, these all had legal origins. And changing the laws and rules around the UDO at this time, I think it's well past time that we have a full look at this. And so that was added to your strategic plan after I had put in my my application. And so I was very excited. This will be a very influential time to be on planning and zoning, because a lot of these reviews, you're sort of one step on a conveyor belt of projects, and changing the nature of that conveyor belt is what we're looking at right now. And this is a very exciting time to do that. So there's many opportunities for revision of the UDO in ways that can foster equitable growth in our community, that we can really take this is a really wonderful opportunity for that. My history and qualifications, there's a lot of boards and commissions, I think, that, it's your history and qualifications don't matter as much. It is much more about getting a lot of voices in. This one, though, there's highly technical, legal things, quasi-judicial hearings that occasionally have to happen, and experience matters, and that's one of the things that I bring to this position. So not only have I served for over 6 years on 2 boards and commissions with the city, function as a leader, I've also dealt with one of the most difficult land use controversies in Asheville, and that is the Haywood Page site, aka Pit of Despair. And that was a very difficult community conversation about the future of a city-owned piece of land. And it was my privilege to serve as chair of that body and to shepherd a unanimous decision to council where it was accepted by council. So when it gets tough, I show up and I can bring people together with different opinions and try to get the best result for the city. Now, I also know that in development, things don't get built if there's not a private benefit. But that doesn't mean that we can't get public benefit out of these developments. And so I see the role of a public body, of planning and zoning, to really ensure that we are getting a built environment that addresses our needs of the future. But we're also maximizing the public benefits that the city can get as a partner, as a land use decision body, and trying to really, at planning and zoning, set up you on council to have things that you can really feel good about voting for, because we've improved them along the way in the process before they get to you, or if we're the last stop in the review process, making sure that they are the best possible use. And to do that, historically, I've used no, because I know that rarely can you really stop projects during this review during the review process. My intention in when I use my no is to improve it. And I've been successful in some of those ways. I've made contributions already in my past to Chapter 7 of City Code. And so in reviewing for this, I was going through Chapter 7. And I said, "Oh yeah, I did that. I'm proud of that change. That's a positive change, I believe, for our community." And so I would like to continue that work at the planning and zoning level. And Chair Kilgore, I know that's your old seat, so you probably have some feelings about your vision for the city. And I really look forward to working with all of you, and in a cooperative way. And getting some of those really needed changes to our what is an outdated code at this point.
And Mr. Fletcher, just want to ask you a question. What could, as far as the revisions in the UDO, what could we actually do to actually help increase affordable housing? What do you think we can revise to sort of address that?
So that's a great question, and obviously something that we need to get working on yesterday. So first off, it's rare that you see help from the state in this matter, but we just did get some. The state legislature just passed some changes to the building codes that are going to make our approach to the missing middle easier to accomplish by having some more realistic building codes around triplexes and quadruplexes. And so when we're looking at missing middle stuff right now, that just got easier thanks to Raleigh. And it's a rare thing to be able to say at the local government level in North Carolina. Another is, I've heard others say it, the parking minimum issue. Parking minimum issue is a cars before people approach, and I take the people before cars approach. We're trying to make a human-sized city, not a car-sized city. And I also know that we're not going to be able to have our goals of a livable, a great environment if we don't look at density. But I also think that we need to look at incremental growth that is more widely acceptable by the public rather than explosive and exponential growth, which tends to generate backlash and not create the little steps that we need to get to a future with more affordable housing.
Councilwoman Mosley.
I was delighted when you mentioned, hello, Andrew,
Hi.
when you mentioned how a lot of things that were law led to unintended and perhaps intended consequences. You mentioned redlining, and you mentioned an emphasis for equitable changes. Can you be specific as it relates to that? What changes could be made to our UDO to help Black and Brown members of our community do better in our community, if anything that you can think of?
Well, at the UDO level, I believe it can be difficult to draw those types of lines. I think there's a lot of policies that could be done in conjunction with changes. So if you're making a change to a zoning code and you know that there's going to be more density, there has to be parallel changes that try to keep people in their homes and anti-gentrification tools.
Can you give examples of those changes?
Yes, being able to supply credit lines to neighborhoods, tax rebates as the value of land goes up, supplying tax rebates to eligible homeowners in vulnerable neighborhoods. The city's already started on that. I think that program could help. So a lot of the changes that could be done, they need to be paired with other policies that mitigate what we know are downsides of overall positive changes.
So thank you very much, Angela. Your time is up. Thanks. Thank you very much.
Awesome. We will move on to our next candidate, which is Susan Bean. I see Susan in the room.
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Oh, excellent. Yep, we can hear you great. And I will go ahead and start the timer now.
Great, thanks. Wonderful to see you all, council members and staff. Thanks for the chance to interview for Planning and Zoning Commission. I have been in Asheville since 2011, and I've been working for Mountain True, which is an environmental advocacy organization, for the last 7 years. And I've recently moved into a role as our housing and transportation director. And so in my time in this organization, I've been learning a lot about what makes a community healthy and how we can grow sustainably, and how the built environment has impacts inevitably on the natural environment. And so I would just say I've learned a lot and am committed to Asheville and have been for many years. So would be interested and excited to serve in a role like being on the Planning and Zoning Commission that does seem to have a lot of influence on how the built environment continues to grow for our community. And see how I can be effective in that role, considering and balancing different priorities and concerns to try and address in particular, the housing crisis that we face is one of the biggest priorities that I see, but recognizing that there are other competing and conflicting needs and concerns that are inevitably have to be weighed in trying to create enough housing to provide what we need. So I'll leave it at that and open it up to your questions.
Okay, well, first of all, I'd like to thank you very much, Ms. Bean, for actually applying for this position. The one question that I have, of course, is I'm always concerned about the affordability factor. And do you have any ideas of whatever that could help increase affordable housing in this area that we're not taking advantage of or whatever?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that to me seems to make the most sense is we just need to add more supply of housing. We need more stock. And I think growing in and up, given what you mentioned earlier, the challenges of our topography, will help create more housing options for people. And alongside that, I think this is an idea that wouldn't be something that would come through planning and zoning, but I was meeting with Greg Borum recently, and he was talking about how if the city could actually shift away from incentivizing Luigi grants and applications and instead rely more on housing vouchers, that would be an interesting way to pull down more federal dollars to free up city tax dollars that wouldn't be, leveraging developers to create affordable housing, but instead we could rely on that federal funding stream to, again, use city tax dollars for other things. And so I think there's a multiple variety of ways.
And that's a great point, Susan, and I appreciate that about the housing vouchers. However, how could we actually get the community to buy in? Because the thing is, with housing vouchers, you can give as many as you want, but if you do not you're not able to get the people to buy in to accept them, then we're just sending them back to the state. So basically, do you have any ideas as far as improving on that?
Yeah, that is a great point. And in my role at Mountain True, we are working on trying to change hearts and minds, basically, about density and affordable housing, and help people understand the need that is out there, and how we as a community can rally to support that. And part of that can be overcoming the stigmas that exist around housing vouchers and accepting housing choice vouchers. But I would say this tool that Greg was talking about, where the city and perhaps planning and zoning as well have the ability to kind of leverage and push on developers of individual projects to either dedicate a set number of units to being maximum AMI dedicated, or to accepting housing choice vouchers, by pushing those developers to include a higher set of voucher dedicated units rather than some of the lower AMI cap requirements. That would interestingly, again, free up the city dollars, but it would also then allow people who are currently in public housing to move out of public housing and into new developments, which would then open up space within the public housing projects for new folks to get into that pipeline. So I think, yeah, there is stigma, but I'm hopeful that there can be some levers that the city and planning and zoning could push developers to accept more of those.
Okay, Councilwoman Rosemary, you have a
It's
question?
almost as if you and Greg were watching yesterday's HCD meeting. So I appreciate everything you just said. I'm going to ask the question that I asked before. What tools does Asheville need to explore to balance growth with what established neighborhoods want or say they need? And how do you change minds if those two things are different?
Yeah, I think that is a great question. And I do not have a brilliant answer to that question, to be honest. I do think the Emma community has done some great work on tools that can help address anti-displacement issues. And one of those things could be the city could make an anti-displacement resolution, could commit to that, and then brainstorm and create strategies to allow people to stay in their homes and alongside gentrification that we know is inevitable, because we don't want communities to be disinvested in either. I mean, we need to continue to improve infrastructure for, legacy neighborhoods. And that will then increase the desirability of those neighborhoods, but we want to have protections for those existing homeowners and residents to stay in place. So what those tools are, I don't have the right answer for that, but I would love to look into that.
And I don't have the answer either. That's why I asked. I'm not going to ask you another question, but I want you to know that what you just said was literally the first time I've heard anyone discuss an anti-displacement resolution. So thanks for lifting that up. I appreciate that.
Okay, and at this time, Councilman Mooney, do you have any questions?
Susan, thank you for applying to be considered for the Planning and Zoning Board and for your work in our community. The question I have for everyone today is that in our strategic priorities adopted as part of this year's council budget process, we've included direction to do some revisions to the Unified Development Ordinance, namely looking at Chapter 7. What are some of the creative solutions you suggest for zoning challenges we face around affordable housing, climate change mitigation, et cetera? How can zoning help us meet those challenges through our strategic priorities to address things like core services, reparations, climate resiliency? And then what are the barriers to those solutions that you have, or could we do them today?
Yeah, I think looking at the code to define barriers to density is a big one for me. Things like reducing or removing minimum lot sizes, allowing things like duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes on what currently are zoned as single family lots. Those are some changes that we could look at. But I think the challenge is that folks in our community, existing residents, I think it's just natural and human to resist changes like that. And our government has for decades pitched the single family home with your postage lot and your picket fence as sort of the ideal, and you have made it in life and you're successful. And so changing some framing around allowing density and duplexes and triplexes into existing neighborhoods and seeing that as a good thing that can help affordability and can help our community in other ways. is an important mental shift that we all need to be helping our community come to terms with, because that would be different.
And thank you very much, Susan.
Yeah, thank you all.
Okay, Sarah?
Awesome. We will move on to our next candidate. I believe I saw David Moritz in the room. Awesome. Can get a quick audio check. Perfect. All right, and I will go ahead and begin the timer now.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for this opportunity to apply for the planning board. My name is David Moritz, and I'm a local developer. I've been here for 10 years, and prior to that, I've been working in the real estate sector for 15 years, both in the financing and construction. I'm excited to be part of the board. I'd like to get more involved in Asheville decision making, and I think I can bring a lot of experience to the board, different perspective. I'm very committed to the city. I have a vested interest in the city. And one of the hot topics is obviously affordability of housing. That's something that's very important to me, as well as climate change. And I'm trying to work towards finding some solutions directly. Working on trying to build some micro apartments, which I think is a different type of project the city hasn't seen, which will bring lower priced housing to downtown. I think some of the important issues to me are, obviously affordable housing, also walkability, livability, and trying to be the most efficient with the land that we have. As I had heard Councilwoman Kilgore mention, we are land constrained. So I think it's critically important that we think very carefully about the land that we have available. And then at the same time, a lot of our land has been allocated to single family due to a history of throughout the country of segregation and poor past planning, thinking that we had unlimited land, and some poor decisions have been made in the past with respect to highways and things like that I think it's important that we address as soon as possible. And so I'd be very interested to join the Planning Commission, and I'll open it up, or I'd be happy to answer questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moritz, for applying. And so as far as my question on the affordability issue, you've already addressed that in the actions that you're taking within the community to introduce to us the micro housing. So we greatly appreciate that. And at this time, I'd like to open it up to any other Councilman Mosley or Rooney that would like to ask. Okay.
Sure, I'll go. When you look at our UDO, and I believe you started to touch on this in your opening, what specific measures do you believe are barriers to growth in Asheville? In other words, what in our UDO prevents growth, and can you propose some changes?
Yes. The overall problem with our UDO is that besides the downtown core area, we have a suburban zoning. And that's something that has been done historically for a variety of reasons, including segregation and urban flight to suburbia. And so we still have significant portions of our city limits that are zoned for suburban living. That is basically a small building with a giant parking lot, which is done to make it convenient for people that live in the suburbs. My personal view is we have no choice but to densify and to create a dense, walkable city. And that's possible in downtown. The zoning there is fine. I think where we need to prioritize zoning changes are on the corridors of the city, and primarily along the bus corridors. We have public transit already, and those where the public transit currently is where we need to build density. So for me, that would be Merriman, that would be Broadway, that would be Hendersonville Road, that would be Patton. Patton is not so bad. McDowell in particular. I mean, we have a part of a street like McDowell that is walkable to the city, but is currently zoned. You can't build really any housing there, which is shocking because you could build significant housing there. And I understand that part of the street, joins some single family neighborhoods, but the other side of the street doesn't abut it against anything. And the same for Merriman. I mean, I think Merriman as a corridor could support housing. So that's a way we could support some density without disturbing many of the existing neighborhoods, which I think can be challenging, where you have some single family zoning neighborhoods where if you change the zoning there, I don't think a lot will get accomplished. I'm not exactly sure, but on the corridors where you have transit, I think we need to add more density, particularly close to the city. I know we've created some nodes like where Ingalls is on Merriman, but I think those nodes need to be closer to downtown. So zoning that doesn't require parking, that has higher density along those corridors, I think would go a long way.
So I'm glad you mentioned Merriman because that actually goes into my other question. I worked for an organization that provided or built affordable housing on Merriman, and the pushback was intense. Even years later, after it's been proven to be successful, the thought of adding more is alarming to folks. So I'm wondering, what tools does Asheville need to explore to balance growth with neighborhood desires and needs?
So, the thing is, our issue is that we have certain constraints. One, as you mentioned, the neighborhoods, the zoning. The issue is that Asheville is going to continue to grow, and we need to meet that growth. And so, I think we have to do what's best for the community, and in some cases, that requires doing things that a particular neighborhood doesn't want. I think it's just the hard truth. I mean, for example, I believe in community input. I think it's very important, but I think there's also a limit to it. For example, on Charlotte Street, if you ask the Charlotte Street neighborhood what they wanted, they would gate the entire North Asheville, Charlotte area. They would put a gate on Charlotte Street. So sometimes neighborhoods are only interested in their particular need, and it can go too far. I think as city council and as planning board, we have to do what we think is best for the entire community. Clearly that will involve neighborhood input, listening to them. But I think it also requires some pushback in terms of, every neighbor is always going to say traffic. They're always going to mention certain, words that I think we need to go back with real data. Like, for example, on the Larchmont property, people, mention all sorts of things like traffic. But the truth is, a lot of, apartment projects don't create the traffic people think it does. A lot of the traffic is through traffic. A Burger King is going to get a lot more traffic than an apartment building. And so I think we have to make some hard choices, but ultimately we have to do what's best for the community, because if we don't, it's just things are going to get worse in terms of affordable housing, and we have to focus on the areas where we can.
Thank you, David. Yeah, thank you, David. I think our time is up, so we're going to go, Sarah.
Perfect. Thank you. And we do have one final candidate. I believe Brian Greiner is on the line here. Mr. Greiner, are you there? You might have are you muted? I see him there. Brian Greiner, are you there?
It's possible that if there's a technical difficulty, Brian, if you can put a comment in the chat so we can see if you're having technical difficulties. But we also could potentially do another agenda item, like see if there's anyone in the queue or something while we allow Brian to leave and come back. Oh,
there he is.
We see a hand. Might be difficulty with the camera and audio.
If that's the case, sometimes leaving the meeting and coming back will prompt the cues to allow the camera and the microphone. If not, if you go to the top of the meet.google.com and click on the padlock symbol, it will allow you to turn on your camera and microphone. There's a little slide bar. It's a bright blue color with a gray slide option.
Okay.
There we go. All
Welcome.
right, we can see you. We can't hear you just yet.
Okay.
Yeah, for some reason my computer is doing crazy things today. I apologize. I have listened to everything and I've been there. So anyway, sorry for the technology. I was trying to use a headset and it's just not working. Let me shut this thing off. Can you hear me all right?
Yep.
Yes.
Great.
Could you move to is it the left or right so we can see your full face? Or
Okay.
There you go. Okay.
All right. It's going through my phone and my computer. Sorry, I'll speed it up.
I'll start the timer now.
Okay. Chairperson Kilgore, great to see you. Councilman Mosley and Rooney, great to see you. Good to see staff. I know many of you from many years of being involved in Asheville and downtown. Just a little bit about me as a refresher. I'm a realtor and I have 3 real estate offices. And of course, I've worked with Sandra before. Asheville, Lake Lure, and Greenville. I also founded the Asheville Independent Restaurant Association in 2002, and I built one of the first restaurants in the Grove Arcade, which is now Carmel's. So that was quite a challenge to be the first major tenant in the building. I was on the Downtown Association for 12 years, president for a couple of those years, met a lot of staff during those years. I also was on the Downtown Commission for 9 years, and also 5 years in Belshare, and I was the vice chair and the chair. So all those experiences, I've worked with many of the departments within the city, so I'm somewhat familiar with a lot of it. And Downtown Commission helped teach me a lot about the way that the city works. Over 10 years ago, I worked on the Downtown Master Plan and spent 3 years on that plan. And I know you guys are doing some revisions to that at this point since it's been around a long time. My daily work involves planning and zoning, obviously in my role as a realtor and a broker in charge. I've worked with and have worked currently with planners in Buncombe, Madison, Rutherford County, and other counties around us. I've worked with many of the planners within the city over the years, as I've stated. I'm a good listener and I make good decisions based on input received and good judgment. And to be the last one, some of the ideas that I have to answer Councilman Rooney's questions are a little bit repetitive, but with a little bit different twist. Regarding changes in the UDO, I'm a strong proponent of eliminating the missing middle and adding multifamily and residentially zoned properties. Specifically, there are great examples in Grove Park, Norwood Park, Montford, Kenilworth, West Asheville. And so you just wonder why that can't be brought back. And I think that's a big solution to some additional housing. I do also recommend some of the other candidates have mentioned eliminating the parking requirements. And I believe, Ben, you were in the meeting we had with the speaker series where we brought in a lady from Buffalo, and she brought in some amazing results for adaptive reuse of existing buildings, including churches, modifying retail storefronts into smaller sections to allow both housing and small businesses to shine. And I was very moved by that. I think that's something that we can look at for sure. Regarding additional housing, Working with developers, I've been through the development process many times. In fact, I think that's where I first met Ben. There are added costs to many of these developments, and I would say fast tracking developments and eliminating some of those fees if it's possible and it meets with the objectives of the city would reduce some of the overall cost of projects. And I do believe that developers, the private sector does a better job of providing housing, provided they have assistance from government. Why planning and zoning? I want to use my skills and my knowledge to make good decisions for our community. And I have the background and I work in this every day. So those are kind of my comments, and I'm open to questions from the panel.
Well, first, I'd like to thank you very much, Byron, for being here, and I greatly appreciate you talking about the as far as developers working with the government, working more with developers, because I have spoken to some of the developers, and basically some of the constraints are the reasons why we have not had more developers actually take an interest in coming to Asheville. So I greatly appreciate that point of view. And if there's anyone else here that would like to ask Byron, feel free. Councilwoman Antoinette Mosley, do you have a question?
Yeah, I wanted to ask Byron a question. Hello, I'm so glad to see you today.
Good to see you.
What does our UDO get right?
Oh, good question. I think we've adapted the UDO over the years to solve problems that were created. I can't say that I think we have a good base. I think we need to tweak it, but we also need to. We're really good at looking at other communities and learning from their mistakes and implementing them in our changes. And I think we need to continue that. A little diversion, when we were doing the food truck analysis and trying to make it right, we learned from many communities of what they did wrong. And we made a good decision on what we did. We didn't end up with, Austin, Texas, where you have food trucks on every corner and loud generators and some of the things that were negative about it. We also were an incubator for businesses to grow from a food truck to a bricks and mortar. And it was really difficult discussion with the Asheville Independent Restaurant Association, because those were people that traditionally were brick and mortar, and to accept the food trucks, even though it was a trend that was happening, it was a long discussion, but we did the right thing. So I would say the UDO is a moving and growing thing, and we learn from mistakes and we make adjustments. So I think it's a constant need to update it, but I can't give you a specific that what we do right. I think we have some really good rules in place. Hopefully that kind of gets to the core of your answer or your question.
Yes, I just always like to kind of end on something positive. That's
yeah.
Pull something. We haven't.
Councilman Rooney, do you have a question or anything?
Oh, go ahead, Antoinette. I need to finish.
I was just going, Dawn, I mean, we haven't talked about hotels. Any comment?
I am a big
in hotels and when it is and when it isn't appropriate.
I'm a big proponent of letting the market do what it needs to do in terms of supply and demand. And I was very involved in the Embassy Suites thing and the minor tweaks that were going on with that with the Downtown Commission. And is it the right decision? I guess we have a history of overbuilding hotels and then becoming Section 8 affordable housing. So yeah, I'm a big proponent of market supply and demand, and not necessarily regulating. Yeah, we needed to take a pause, but was it the right decision? What we did was, forced development in the county versus the city.
Thank you, Bernie. Sarah?
That is time. All right.
Well, thank you for the opportunity, and sorry for the technical difficulties. I'll figure out this computer somehow.
Okay. Are there any more discussions from the committee members? And so we'd like to thank everyone for actually for applying and participating in our interviews today. We've had some wonderful candidates here, and we greatly appreciate you taking interest in our city. And the vote for the appointments will take place at the council meeting later this evening. And I'd like to thank everybody else for everyone for joining us. And at this time, we'd like to our last item of business to review is the proposed amendment changes to the Asheville area riverfront redevelopment commission ordinance. And so now I'd like to turn it over to Ann Keller, Chair of the Riverfront Development Commission, and Stephanie Monson.
Vice Mayor, Councilwoman Roney has a hand raised.
I'm sorry.
I just had a question about procedure. Are we indeed not going to make a recommendation to council based on the interviews?
No, what we're going to do, Kim, is we're actually going to present the candidates to the council. Basically, we're going to open up discussion for anyone in council can make a motion for any candidate that they saw that we would vote on. So we'll do it in that.
I appreciate that. I know that for some folks that are watching, that's different than our previous process. I just wanted to give an opportunity to let folks know.
Yes, and then we'll also introduce Antoinette's basic suggestion as to how we'll move forward reserving the seat. Okay, and at this time, like I said, I'd like to turn it over to Ann Keller, Chair of the Riverfront Development Commission, and Stephanie Sedahl, the new Director of Urban Design and Place for recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilwoman Gore. Kilgore, we have put together a presentation for you to summarize what we've been doing on the Riverfront Commission, what we look forward to doing this year and into next year, and some of the changes that relate to that based on the ordinance updates that we have proposed. Next, Sarah. Just to remind everybody what the purpose of the commission is, it is to give recommendations to the city and county on how to how to protect and continue the development in a sustainable way of the regional riverfront, meaning, not just in the RAD, but along the river in, broader area. Next. If you look here, you can see the list of members right now. There are a couple of vacancies that will hopefully be filled here pretty soon, especially based on the new ordinance changes that we proposed. But there's a great variety of people with different backgrounds, different levels of experience. Of course, we have County Commissioner Parker Sloan and Councilwoman Sage Turner also serving as members of this group, as well as Vice Mayor McAllister of Woodfin, and a host of people who have businesses or other interests within the regional riverfront. Next. Just another quick reminder, because, there are a lot of things that you come upon all the time. How the Riverfront Commission came about was in the early days of looking down at the RAD and trying to think about what the city wanted to do there to improve things in the old industrial area, I guess you'd say. The city manager convened a variety of organizations and people to talk about how they thought maybe things should go. And from that set of people in those discussions, the city manager created the commission, and or let's say city council created it with the input from the manager and other people. And in 2010, the work really began around the same time as the River Arts District Transportation Improvement Project that transformed the area immensely. In 2011, the Riverfront Commission was involved in a lot of the discussions that you all remember about what to do with these brownfield areas down in the RAD, the stockyards, ice house, all those areas that have become new developments, and a lot of areas that have been cleaned up because of that focus. The commission also provided some input to the Flood Mitigation Task Force. Then between 2012 and 2021, the organization played a key role in reviewing development projects and guidelines in the RAD especially, and advocating for new transportation options. I joined in 2022, I believe. Seems like so long ago, it was just last year. And we held our first River Summit in Asheville in the fall of last year, which was well attended by 90 or more people from a really broad variety of interests, from business owners and river outfitters to artists and people who live in the area right around the RAD, and people who live in, we had the stormwater manager from Hendersonville, for example, and a lot of different interesting people came. Next. As it said on the bottom of the last slide, we don't need to go back, but it does say that one of the things we got was a real, a lot of support and comment about the need to deal with stormwater. Around the same time that we were doing that summit, we were aware that there were stormwater issues that had created impairments in the river, and in the spring, those areas were listed as being impaired by the state and the federal government. So it is a big challenge for us. And going to the reason for revising this ordinance and updating it, it hadn't been looked at and updated significantly for 10 years. And we thought it was important to reevaluate what the commission was doing, what kind of activities it was invested in, and take into account all the changes that had occurred in the RAD and in the larger riverfront area in terms of development and the increasing impacts of climate change. So those were key elements, along with the fact that with the new design review committee, we don't do the same level of design review that was in the earlier ordinance. And that was, we needed to take that out and really make it current. And I think I mentioned before that River Summit examined the impacts of stormwater, but we also came away realizing that we needed to have other voices included in the conversation from inside our city, but also across the county. Next. So first of all, we proposed to name the commission a little differently, Asheville Buncombe Riverfront Commission, bringing in a larger area. We think that it's important to do this because it signals to people the value of using a more watershed approach rather than looking at small areas, thinking bigger, and how all these different areas impact the river eventually. So in doing all of that and considering about other people and other voices, we reduced Riverlinks and SIBO's membership to one each. They had two. We put more inclusive terminology in the ordinance, such as renters and other people, not just business owners or folks that we had traditionally focused on there. And we proposed that the city of Asheville appoint among one of their one of the 5, I think it is, appointments that are available to the city, somebody who is from a traditionally underserved community near the riverfront. And that would add a whole different perspective to it. We also added Black Mountain, and we'd like the county to appoint somebody from Swannanoa to, consider that area, which is in development, and it definitely is upstream of us, and we get the results of what they do. Yes, Kim?
Sorry for the interruption. I just have some clarity around this bullet about proposing a City of Asheville appointee to represent traditionally underserved communities.
Yes.
Are you suggesting that would be a standing seat? That way it's specifically the chair is reserved for the neighborhood?
Yes, that's what we talked about. We had a lot of conversation about that, and hopefully we will have great success in filling that and getting that input. But that's how it's written in the ordinance.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And then, I was at the very bottom there. Just emphasize better management, more interaction, more discussion, more thinking on a broader scale, so that obviously our river doesn't begin and end in Asheville, and we need to consider things better, I think, than we have perhaps in the past. Next. So what we've done to this point is we got the updated the changes ratified at our last commission meeting on August 10th. We presented it to the PED committee last week, and here we are now with you. We hope to get a positive vote for the updates at, I believe it's the September 12th commission meeting. And so I think unless something changes, that's the last we knew it was going to come up at that point. And next slide, please.
This is staff. This is Stephanie Dahl. I'll just say that we have confirmed a date for September 26th.
Oh, 26th. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. And some other things that we wanted to work on is to continue thinking and giving ideas to the city about stormwater and how it could improve, how we could work to improve how we manage that. We are still doing higher level RAD design reviews, but not the level of detail. Now we have a person who, our vice chair is Kate and Kaya, who couldn't make this meeting, but she is on the design review committee. So she's a great connection between the Riverfront Commission and the design review committee. We have also begun to participate with Sustainability Advisory Committee in a joint work group that's looking at how the city's fee study for the stormwater program is continuing to develop, and what potential program involvements or improvements we could come up with. We've met a couple of times with staff members in the city, and we had a meeting recently with the consulting group that's doing the work, and we had a really valuable discussion, I think. One of our other subcommittees, if you will, is seeking to talk to elected officials and leaders around the region about some of the topics that we focus on, and all with the idea of being more inclusive and broadening the input and finding ways to work together around this. As you may remember, it isn't just a fun place to be on the river or near the river, but it also is a huge generator of our economy, $3.8 billion a year. And so we need to look at the economic and the environmental all woven together. And then we want to continue looking at the RAD, how can we, and this is interesting, the conversations that you were having earlier with the interviewees about transportation and how we can ensure that our transportation options increase down there so that people don't have to drive down to the RAD. They can get there with other means, and trying to figure a way to creatively reduce the graffiti impacts in the area by advocating for more public murals and so forth. Next. And I think that's pretty much it for me. I'd be happy to take any questions, and hopefully Stephanie will be there if I don't have the answer. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Keller. At this time, do you have any questions, council members?
This is Kim, and I just want to say thank you for the work that y'all are doing.
Thanks.
And for your voluntary leadership in our community. I attended the summit and learned a lot by being at the table. I appreciated the conversations about who wasn't in the space for these conversations and how authentic invitations can be made. So thank you for that as well.
Thank you.
So if there are no further questions, would anyone like to make a motion to move this to full council?
I'd be happy to. I just want to make sure I have the correct date because the date in the motion says September 24th. Is it the 26th, Stephanie? Okay. So I move to recommend Asheville City Council consider amending at the September 26th, 2023 meeting and a new ordinance establishing the Asheville Buncombe Riverfront Commission.
This is Kim, second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. At this time, we'd like to do a roll call vote. Councilwoman Mosley.
Aye.
Councilwoman Rooney.
Aye.
And myself, Councilwoman Twinkle. Aye. Motion passes. And that'll be moved on to the full council for this evening's vote. And at this time, is there anyone in the speaker queue, Sarah?
We do not have any callers in the queue.
Okay. And if we don't have any other further discussions or anything,
Just wanted to note one thing before we dismiss. Proposing canceling the September, I believe it's the 12th meeting, being that there's no agenda items, and then reconvene in October for several appointments.
Okay, Councilwoman Mooney?
I think this works, but for some reason, if we do not fill all the openings for planning and zoning, because it's a quasi judicial board and also only has 5 members, if we make a decision that we need to have the September meeting for the planning and zoning consideration, my suggestion is October is perfect because we would actually have time to do the outreach if we leave an opening, but just wanted to put that out there. I know we have some legal requirements.
My preference would also be that if we decide to hold it open, that we do the interviews in October. No, yeah, because we're in August. Yes, in the October meeting as well.
Okay, great. So you seem to all be in agreement of that. So Sarah? Okay.
Great by me.
Thank you. So no further discussion. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.